So good evening everybody, I'm Jay for the Photographer Academy, and tonight we have a fantastic webinar with amazing photographer Michelle Whitmore and her stunning insect macro photography. So hi Michelle, good evening, how are you?
Hi Jay, hi everybody, I'm fine thank you. Yourself?
Yes, I'm very good, thanks. So just before I do start the presentation, let's just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into photography and how you got into this very sort of specialist area of macro photography that you're so good at.
Like most people, I've had a camera for a long time. Used to take holiday snaps and things. Never thought about doing it seriously. And then I was studying for an Open University degree in environmental science. It took 10 years to accomplish. And I started off originally doing a science program. I was going to go down a biology type route. But the first year course encompasses all different subjects within science, and I found myself more and more drawn to geology and ecology, and I then got a little point and shoot camera which I thought helped with the field trips and stuff. It's easy to record species, come back, check them up on the websites, check them up on field guides, and I then started using them in my presentations and my dissertations and things, and that's how I got into the macro photography. Once I had time to breathe after the 10 years, I then went and got a DSLR and a proper macro lens, and things kind of took off from there. Also a really, really big avid gardener. So they kind of came hand in hand. You know, I've got my own little nature reserve outside. I plant specifically for my bugs. And yeah, it just goes from strength to strength really, and everything that you'll be seeing tonight, all the images, are things that have been taken in the garden.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, thanks for that. So let's not me get in the way of this webinar anymore. I'm going to hand you the screen over, so just bear with me a second.
Good evening everybody. As I just said, most of my work is actually taking place in our garden. We moved into this house 18 years ago, and it was empty for 2 years prior to that, so the wildlife was quite established, as were obviously their little inhabitats. So for me it was just a case of tidying it up, make a few changes, and off we went. The garden itself is on a triangular plot, so lends itself to different planting areas and different styles so that I can get more plants in, much to my husband's disgust, bless him. We've also got a long line of Leylandii at the bottom of the garden, and it separates us from the factory next door. It's the scourge of many people, but to me it's a godsend. It's a source for food, it's a source for nesting, it's just wonderful. So tonight what I'm actually going to look at is the equipment I use in the garden, and then I thought, how am I going to present this? So what I've decided to do is go through insects through the seasons and what you're likely to find at different times of the year. I shall also take a look at different ways that you can attract wildlife into the garden, and then finally a few tips for successful garden insect photography. So the all-important bits and pieces is, what equipment do I use? Well, I have a Canon 50D. I am often asked, why don't I use a full frame camera? And the answer to that is very simple. The 50D has a crop sensor, so it gets me in even closer than a normal full frame would do. Attached to that I have a Canon EF100 2.8 specialized macro lens. I occasionally use a Sigma 18-250. Most of that is for our wedding work, but I do use it for wide-angled shots like the one that you can see there on the screen. I'm not a technical person. It's not about equipment, it's the way you use it, and I have literally got 3 lenses. One's the 100mm, the other's the Sigma, and then I do have the specialized 65mm MPE macro lens for my extreme macro work. Whilst I'm in the garden, I usually have a tripod with a shutter release attached as well, just to give a little bit of stability, particularly if it's slightly windy or you know, if things are moving about, it just gives the camera that little bit of edge. I usually have a flash gun on, but I don't often use it, and I have been known to use the pop-up flash on the 50D itself. Outside, you don't need a massive amount of light added because there's a great big softbox called the sky, so it's just to give it a little bit of edge. Extra equipment that I often have handy is a little camping seat or a kneeler, a garden kneeler. They're useful obviously for comfort more than anything. Plamps are something that, how do I explain plamps? They're like, you've got one clamp at one end that you can attach to the tripod or a branch. The other end of the clamp has a pincer type clamp, which you can use to either move branches out of the way, or you can use it to hold a reflector. Basically, it's an extra pair of hands which, when you're out in the garden, can come really in handy. If it's not a reflector or holding something, it could be put in just holding a piece of coloured card, you know, to create a different coloured background. As I've mentioned, the reflectors, and also a pair of scissors or secateurs, just for a little bit of judicious pruning every now and again if it's needed. Just remove that odd branch out of the background. So what I like to take a look at, as I said, is the garden through the year and the things I do to encourage the insects to hopefully come and stay. And I thought that seeing as we're in the winter, we'd start off with the winter. And unfortunately, although most of this is all about insects, there's not many about at this time of the year. So I thought we'd just have a quick look at some of the things that you can be looking out for. But sadly, this January it's been rather mild and very soggy. Normally, we'd be seeing things like this on our windows. What we're actually looking at here is a ice crystal. I don't know if you can see the main white piece in the middle of the screen. That's actually the dust, the crystal dust, and the water has then just spread off of it from there. It was taken one January morning about 8 o'clock, and it was -8, I think it was, so it's 2 or 3 years ago. And this little crystal was on the glass on the studio door. Yes, it was cold, but I think it was well worth the shot. Obviously, other things that you can be doing is catching snowflakes and other ice crystals. What's the word I'm looking for? Nope, it's escaped me. Icicles, that's it. So you've got icicles as well that are creating patterns at this time of the year. A few early plants are waking up from the winter slumber. They give you a few things to practice on. On the left, we've got the snowdrops. They're just about coming really into their own. And on the right, we've got some hellebores, which are just coming out. And as you can see, on that particular hellebore, there's a little spider. So it was a warm day, or warmer, and it had slumbered out just to see what it could find. This time of the year, plants play a big part for some of the insects that do appear. Most are hibernating. Every now and again, when it's a little bit warmer than normal, they'll creep out, and it's nice for them to have a little bit of sustenance to keep them going through the rest of the winter. So currently in my garden, I've actually got hellebores flowering. In the middle there, you can see the mahonia. On the end, we have the winter flowering heather. I've also got a few cyclamen that are hanging around from the autumn due to the mild weather. This picture was taken last March. It was a little ladybird that had creeped out. It was a mild day, and it was in need of a little bit of nourishment. Other early birds that you can see are caterpillars. This particular one had been hibernating under a pile of leaves and was just coming out for a wander. This caterpillar was found on the flowering heather, as you can see, having a little munch before going back into hibernation. I think about a week later we had some more snow, so not quite sure if that one survived or not, but the garden and the plants certainly helped it along its way. So moving into the spring and the summer, again the flowers play a really, really big role. They provide pollen and nectar. Pollen contains proteins and allows bees, hoverflies and other creatures to mate and breed. The nectar is sugar-rich energy drink which many depend on. So a good wildlife garden needs a good supply of both throughout the year, from January through to late autumn. This ladybird's one of my favourite images. I just love the colour and the vibrancy on it. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I've taken this at 30th of a second f8 and ISO 200. And I just sat there in the garden for 5–10 minutes. I was actually doing some weeding at the time, and I spotted it, so off I go, get the camera, get the tripod. And it wasn't until I came back and put it all on the computer later that evening that I spotted what the ladybird was after. And I don't know if you can see underneath the flower of the euphorbia towards the base, there's actually a little bug there. So this ladybird was obviously after its lunch. Again, as I said earlier, encourage one lot, you encourage the predators that go with it, and yeah, that's a good example of one. This is a little lily beetle. I plant a lot of flowers in pots, lilies particularly. I can then move them, they shelter in the greenhouse over winter, and then I can bring them out and I can plant them, I can position them around the garden when I need a bit of colour. Or if they've got something interesting on them, I can move them, you know, to an easier place to photograph. And this little chap was just coming out. They are a bit of a pain. They do eat the bulbs, so you know they are a bit of a bane, but they're very pretty. A couple of hours later, I found him in a slightly different position, but obviously, you know, having a good time. And they've both been at my lilies. This is a cinnabar moth. It's common throughout much of Britain. And it's one of the brighter moths that you'll see, and one of the few that you'll see during the day. Very pretty. Most people think it's a butterfly, but yeah, very pretty moth. The caterpillars of these, I haven't got an image to show, but the caterpillars are very bright. They're like tigers. They're yellow and black stripes. And they actually feed on the ragwort plants, so they're good at keeping the ragworts under control, particularly sort of like in meadows and fields and things. And obviously this cinnabar was looking for its mate to go and produce some of those. Don't forget that it's not just the insects that are out there and you can use your macro lens on. This is a dandelion seed head, and I think you can see quite clearly the little the seeds before they all got disturbed and blew away. I love things like that. I think they're really pretty. As with this clematis, the stamens and the pollen on these are really gorgeous. One of Jay's favourite images. Insects are obviously really small in comparison to how we are, and it's often a case of looking for them, and the more you sit and look in one position, the more you'll see and the more you'll observe. This little spider was hiding in a dianthus, and it was taken early in the evening, and I could see that it had something in its mouth. It was quite static, but it was engrossed in something, and I couldn't quite see what it was actually doing. And it wasn't until I looked on the computer later that evening that I realised that ant was on the menu for dinner that night. No flash or anything filled on this one, and as I say, everything's direct. So on this one I've actually photographed it at f4, ISO 100. I usually use 100 or 200, try not to go above. Just works for me. It's just a case of sitting, looking. I noticed on one of the bushes that the leaves seem to be disappearing or the young leaves were disappearing before they'd even had a chance to mature. Close inspection found the whole thing covered in caterpillars. On these few leaves there are about 6 to 8, and as you can see they're quite closely bunched and they're nibbling away quite happily. I was just quite fascinated to just sit and watch them in the way that they climbed over each other to get to the next piece of leaf. I did crop this one in a little bit because I just liked the head-to-head, wondering where they were going to go. And they didn't, they just carried on burrowing downward, eating downwards towards the centre of the leaf rather than climb over, but some of the others did climb over a little bit. It was quite interesting to watch them. And on the grass just below the caterpillars was this little chap. It's a baby shield bug. It's about, it was less than ½ centimetre. It really was one of those things that was, what's that? At first I thought it was a bit of pollen or grass seed, but closer inspection and I could see it was this little tiny baby shield bug. When you're taking your pictures, weather is something to be taken into consideration. For example, you won't see many winged species like bees and butterflies when it's windy or raining. So as you can see, this particular bee, it's on a dry day, it's on a thistle, and next to it is a mature adult flower beetle. They were both enjoying the sunshine. Likewise, if it's too hot, then there are species that will avoid the hottest part of the day, things like the woodlice. They'll stay under the stones and in the crevices in order to conserve their energy and reduce the risk of dehydration, which could obviously lead to death from drying out. Others, on the other hand, like the rain. This little snail was having a good old munch on one of my irises that was going over. Snails are very easy to shoot. They're slow, methodical eaters. And they will move about, obviously, but they don't move very fast. Great for practicing on. So as well as weather conditions, the other thing you need to think about is shooting at different times of the day for a greater variety of shots and insects indeed. Many insects, many species like this little blue holly butterfly, are out first thing in the morning, warming up before flying off for the day. Sometimes it's good to catch them like that. You get the early morning dewdrops, give a twist to some of the images. Others don't hang around for very long, and they can be pretty elusive once active. As I said, this little blue holly was on the leaf for about 15-20 minutes. It was taken at 10 o'clock in the morning, so it was just before it flew off. They like to feed on sort of holly, ivy and brambles. This one was, I took it, because it was getting slightly agitated, I took this one at 1/800th of a second, although it is at f2.8, so I wanted to take it really, really quick, and it's ISO 200. This is an adult shield bug. Just warming up on the Cotoneaster. As I said, a lot of them do like to warm up a little bit to get their metabolism going. Once they go, and you don't see them very much during the day, or they flit around a lot. This particular cricket is out in the middle of the day. It's hardening up. They often, dragonflies and damselflies, crickets often appear sort of early to late morning, lunchtime, and it gives them plenty of time for their wings to dry out and their bodies to harden up before they take off as a fully grown fledged adult. I just love this picture and the way that the casing is sort of by the side of it. I don't know, it's like a mirror image but upside down. I just like the way that this one came out. As I said, a number of species like the butterflies don't appear till it's warmer, and then they flit about. There's a little small skipper enjoying nectar from a clover at the bottom of the garden. They don't hang around for long. A bit like this little, I say little, it's a large white munching on some euryssimums. What I love about this picture is the blue eyes, the real pale blue eyes with the dots on, and the way and the whiteness of the flower of the butterfly, and the way it contrasts with the purple of the flower. Early evenings are a good time to catch a variety of insects. It's when it's starting to cool down. This little spider appeared when I was watering some plants after we'd had a longish dry spell. It'd been sheltering in the from the hot sun in the leaves of the daisy, and I was busy watering, and it obviously decided it needed a little bit of a drink. And so out it popped. Cue camera, down goes the hose pipe. No, it wasn't a hose pipe, it's a watering can. But out comes, and it sat there just, you can't actually see the water drop on there, but it was definitely drinking that day. Covered in pollen, so it'd obviously been busy. Early evening is also a good time to catch some of the early nighttime insects like this little scarlet moth. Lacewings also start to stir about then. These insects can be encouraged by planting flowers that have got a strong evening fragrance, like the stocks and the honeysuckles. And they also tend to be pale in colour, so that the moths can see them at dusk. The advantage of encouraging species like this is, well, depending on where you live, obviously, but the moths are then a feast for the local bat. So I managed to sort of, encourage other things into the garden. I know it lives a few houses away kind of thing, but by what's in my garden is prolonging the bat colony, the local bat colony. Slow worms are also about this time of night, so watch out for them. I found one or two in our compost heap, but I've never actually been able to photograph one. Flies. I'm not telling you what it's sat on and what it's eating. I'll let you make your own judgments from that, only to say that it's not pleasant. They're not known for their night eating habits, but they do make easy subjects once they're settled. Blue bottles are particularly pretty, and as you can see, they've got gorgeous iridescent colours, and the markings on the wings and the hairs and the eyes, and I don't know, I just love them. I just love them. I'm weird. So it's worth getting to spending a little time getting to know some of your species. So whether you do it through books or the internet, or simply just by watching them going about their daily business, the more you get to know about them, the more you can anticipate what they're going to do and where they're going to do it. You observe them, then the chances are they have a routine or they follow a route. Bees particularly do have set routes, set favourite flowers, and you can quite easily set up a spot, set your chair down, put your equipment up, and just sit there and watch for a while. And they do use the same flight paths, and they'll communicate back to the colony where the best sources of nectar are, and you can just sit and watch them. You can sit in my back garden on a hazy summer afternoon, and it can be so noisy, even though we live next to a factory and we don't hear the factory, particularly at weekends, obviously. In the garden, the noise is just, it can be really horrendous. You'll get a stream of bees and wasps and just little insects buzzing around. Yeah, Grand Central Station on a busy day. So, moving into the autumn. I grow quite a few plants with berries. I think it's important to look after the bigger species as well as the little ones, because without the little ones, the big ones wouldn't be there. So you need to look after both sets to keep an even balance. So I do have, as you can see, a few with berries. We've also got a few fruit trees which we inherited when we moved in. One of them is a pear tree. The pears, for some reason, and I've never found out why, have never been very nice, but the wasps and the flies love it. Once they've fallen, the wasps particularly, the fruit starts to rot and then it starts to ferment, and you can have wasps staggering around in a drunken state. Yeah, they can be a pain, but they're there for a reason. But when they're drunk, they're so amusing and they're so easy to photograph. And if you haven't got any fruit trees, then, you know, anything out of the fruit bowl that's starting to go over, put it outside, put it in a tray or something and just sit and watch, and they will come, they will find it. This is a red-legged shield bug. Spotted it on a plant outside the back door. It was getting quite late when I took this image, so what I did is I actually brought the shield bug indoors into my conservatory studio, and it's actually sat on a rock with some moss. I spent about 10 minutes photographing it, quite obliging it was, and when I'd finished, popped it back outside onto the plant, and it was still there the following morning, but I had to go to work. So yeah, lovely little things. Never seen one of these in my garden before, so I was really pleased to have seen it, and obviously been able to have photographed it. Daddy longlegs or crane flies are also very common in the autumn. Getting them to sit still is another matter, but they do, if you just leave them sit, they will sit. As long as you're not sort of pestering them or right in their faces, they will sit. I don't say they pose, but you can often reel off a couple of shots like I have here. Well, that's the evil look one, as I call it. They're very beautiful. They've got gorgeous eyes. The wings have got lovely markings, just like the flies. And yeah, well worth trying to capture one if you can. This is a comma butterfly. It was taken one lunchtime at the beginning of October last year. It was taken advantage of the late autumn sunshine. I just love the colours on this, and I wanted to particularly keep the sky and the flowers more in focus than blow them out completely, making it look a splodgy mess kind of thing. So I shot this one a little bit bigger at f6.3. Most of what I shoot tends to be between 2.8 and 5. So this one was a little bit longer, just so that I could keep the flowers in the background a little more. This is an aerial view of a pale tussock moth caterpillar. He was wandering along the path. Put him on some leaves, he wasn't that interested. So again with this one I brought him indoors, and he is photographed here on an air plant. Great things to buy from the garden centre. This particular one has a bark wood type base. Well, it's not a branch, it's not quite a bark, it's yeah, it's just a piece of wood. But it's also got some grasses growing out through the top of it, as you can see in the background here on this one. And I can use it for a number of things, obviously because of the wood and the grasses. So I've used it before for crickets and hoppers, but the wood obviously on this one lent itself to this particular moth. It was a cheeky little chap, as you can see. It was quite nosy, and I was actually able to get quite a few images from it. At one point it rolled over and curled up, and as it unfurled itself I managed to grab this shot, and this is out of camera, it's not cropped. I've cleaned it up, a few little spots on the top of its head, a few bits of dirt, but I think it's just a lovely little cute character. I just love him. So autumn's also a good time to see what else is going on in the garden, and you know, cobwebs are aplenty. Sometimes you'll catch the spider in it. Very often though, when it is raining, the spider is hiding under a leaf somewhere, and you'll get all these beautiful little droplets on the cobwebs. Likewise, dewdrops. Again, this could be spring, could be autumn. A little bit of moss there growing through, and some dewdrops on it. One of the few pictures that I've got here tonight, which isn't with the macro lens, this one was with the Sigma, but with said autumn, fungus. There's just so much out there. This is in a quiet little untidy part of the garden, and believe me, I've got several of those. little log pile, which is where some of the creatures live, and I had this this gorgeous fungi growing out of it, and from the name of it escapes me. So, secrets. I find that it's a good idea to plant for a variety of wild species. The more variety you have, the more you'll get in your garden. Use plants that provide a home as well as food and nectar, which I think is really important, and we'll come on to some of those in a minute. Plants for different seasons, so that you have got continuity going throughout the year for anything that is about. This year, as I said, because it's been so mild, I've even seen a bumblebee floating around in the garden. I've not had the opportunity to go out and photograph it, but there has been one or two in between the raindrops. Provide a variety of habitats. I think that is really important. The more you have, again, like the flowers, the more you can encourage to come and stay, and provide food and water, and have lots of patience. That is a big one. So, top 10 plants that I'd recommend. Sunflowers, bright, colourful, adds a burst of sunshine to any garden, but they're also a buffet as such of seeds for birds when the season's changing. They like to stock up. Foxgloves are usually around sort of from June to September. Nice little cottage garden plants. A lot of what I have in my garden are self-seeding. I tend to, as they're going over in the autumn, I tend to sort of shake them off, turn the soil over and see what grows the following year. So my garden is really, really untidy at times, and you never know what's going to spring up where. But it does make for interesting planting, and foxglove is one of those that comes back year after year. One thing to be aware of, though, with foxgloves is the plants are poisonous if eaten by humans or pets. So, you know, if you do have animals, just be a little bit careful where they're concerned. Thyme is a herb, great for cooking, great for creating spaces for beetles and other invertebrates, and a favourite of the bees for its nectar. Lavender is also another big favourite, and it's also very pretty. It's got a beautiful aroma on a hazy afternoon, and from you know, a personal point of view, you can also clip it off, dry the seed heads, and you've also then got some subjects for cold, wet, rainy days later on in the year, again with the macro lens. Honeysuckle is a good little climber, buzzes with visitors in the summer, attracts nectar-loving insects like the hummingbird moth. That's one that we've had in here before. It also has berries towards the autumn, so attracts the birds. The good thing with the honeysuckle and the ivy is they are climbers, so you're kind of creating different stories for different species. Not everything lives on the ground. Some likes it, you know, not top story, but midway up. A rowan is a small tree, or the mountain ash, and it's got gorgeous, gorgeous berries. And it's also a nice little compact tree, which is good for small to medium gardens. But the berries particularly are gorgeous, you know, really do encourage the birds in the autumn. And they've got nice flowers on in the spring too, which the bees and the bees particularly do enjoy. Ice plants are another favourite for the bees. Picantha can be used as a hedge. I do have a couple that are at the bottom of the garden against a fence, so they are sort of like a hedge fence, if that makes sense. And we do get birds nesting in those, and as I said, they've got gorgeous little berries again. They also provide shelter for an exposed position, and also shade, not just shelter, it's shade as well, and a little bit of respite when it's really, really hot. Buddleia is a real big butterfly favourite. It's full of rich nectar. It's got big blousy sprays made up of lots of tiny, tiny flowers, which is just right for them to get their proboscis down. Ivy, little patch at the bottom of the garden behind the summer house, down by the compost bins. I've got about 2 or 3 foot length, not a lot, but it's enough. It gives shelter. It provides lots of space for hibernation. During the autumn, it's got little yellow flowers on it, which gives some of the insects their last bit of fresh nectar, so to speak. And then during the winter, they come out in these gorgeous, gorgeous purple berries. I don't know if you've seen any in the hedgerows at the moment, but round by us they're absolutely teeming. And it just gives the birds something to nibble over and to tide them all through over the winter. So it's worth remembering that every garden is important, even a small tiny patch. After all, they form a corridor so that mammals, insects can get from A to B. And without the little corridors, we wouldn't have the hedgehogs and the nice little things in our garden. So habitats are important. Even if you've got a balcony on an apartment, you can have your own little garden. Potted plants, for example, the insects will find their way there. The birds and the bees will sniff it out, and you can catch some lovely insects. I know a lady in Norway. She may well be listening tonight, I don't know. And she lives in a flat, and she has a little balcony, and she plants her flowers, and she gets lots of snails. No idea how high up it is, but she has lots of snails, and she's becoming quite known for her snail photographs at the moment. So habitats are important. Bird boxes and insect houses are good if you've got the space. They provide alternative opportunities, obviously, for photography. And as you can see, I've actually got about 5, 6 little nest boxes, and these little blue tits come back regularly. The smaller insects, they're encouraged by them. They nest where they know there's going to be food. So not only do I put food out, but because of the way that I've planted, they know there's going to be aphids and the small bugs for them, and they come accordingly. I've also got 2 ponds in the garden. This is one of them that was taken. This image was taken in January. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. It does need a clear out, and I'll do that as soon as the weather starts to get a little bit warmer. All insects, big or small, need a drink, and it doesn't matter whether you've got a little saucer with water in or if you have a big pond. You will get things come down, and you can then photograph them. I like sitting beside this pond particularly in the I'd say late spring, I guess it is. I'm watching the damselflies emerging. We get quite a few in our garden, and they just crawl up the stems and they emerge from their casings, and unfortunately I haven't got an image of one emerging, sadly. That's on my list of things to try and accomplish. But once they're fully emerged, they'll sit around for 3-4 hours sometimes, depending on how warm it is, waiting for their wings to dry out and their bodies to harden up. So you get plenty of opportunity to photograph them, and you'll see them changing from sort of a clear body through to the real vibrant colours. This particular one is a blue azure. And there he is from a different angle. As you can see, he's just sat there. He's totally oblivious to what I'm doing, and he's quite happy for me to move about. Obviously, I haven't disturbed him in any way, shape or form, but as you saw, my pond's not big, so I can move around the edges of it quite easily during the spring when it's obviously tidied up. Long grasses are good for providing shelter. So are log piles and fallen leaves. As you can see, my garden is messy in places. They provide obviously shelter, they provide food. You know, a pile of stones or bricks under a hedge or against a wall will provide plenty of refuge, and encourage obviously the bigger mammals into the garden, like the hedgehogs and the frogs and the toads, which, you know, we've all got the not so nice insect species like the slugs and the snails. Oh, there's a picture there of the worms in my wormery. But we've all got the slugs and the snails and things, and you know, they are there for a reason. They form an essential part of our garden ecosystem, you know, and why not take advantage of them? These particular ants, we're obviously all having a conversation about something or other. They feed on the aphids. The ants in turn, as you saw earlier, are eaten by the spiders. This is a drunken dead wasp. It keeled over. As you can see, it's rather slimy looking, so a slug or a snail had a go at it. Yes, this was an easy picture for me to take, but at the same time, you know, the close-up and the detail on it, I think, is absolutely gorgeous. I love the way that the antlers fall down when they're dead, and they look like dreadlocks to me with their big sunglasses on and their spiky hair. And just the colours of them, they're so vibrant. Yes, as I said, they are a pest, but they do play an important role in the garden. So, you know, use them to practice on. As you can see here, I've got the image of the worms. They're relatively slow, but it's good for honing your skills. The same with the snails. This one's on an obelisk, a metal obelisk I've got in the garden. With the snails, they're quite easy for you to move about and manipulate them without harming them, because obviously all you need to do is touch the shell. You don't need to touch the snails at all. Same with the caterpillars. They'll sit there chomping for ages. You just don't need to move them. You can just sit, practice your techniques, hone in and out, see what you like, try your different f-stops and shutter speeds, and see what results you get. Of course, the other thing with all of that is if you eliminate the ugly part of the food chain, then the prettier, cuter predators don't come into your garden. So, tips for shooting. Be comfortable. You might be a while. As I said earlier, I use a camping stool or the garden kneeler. Take your time. Oh, sorry, that's further down, never mind. Watch for the flight paths. Some species do use the same routes and the same pathways. So if you're just sat observing on the patio, for example, you can see what's going on. Then go and set your camping stool up. See where they're landing. They may not land on the flower in front of you, but you're going to be in the right area at the right time. You can encourage some insects to settle a little closer to you using a solution of sugar and water. Ants particularly are good for sugar. They'll do anything for a trail of sugar. Although that particular picture you saw earlier, that was just a natural one, but they can sit for you. Some seeds, nuts, if you particularly are into bird photography. Water, as I said, is a guaranteed attraction. They all get thirsty. They all need water to sustain themselves. But the most important thing really is to take your time. Let the insects come to you. There's no point saying, oh, I'm going to go outside for 5 minutes and I'm going to shoot this, this and this. It won't happen unless you're really, really very, very lucky. It is a case of just sitting, taking your time. Something may land next to you. Compose yourself. Try and take the image. If it moves off, don't chase after it, because you'll never get a shot. It will just keep moving and it won't come back. And most importantly, they're not keen on mobile phones. You know, the noise puts them off. It's not a noise that they're accustomed to, although obviously they're becoming more and more these days as things go on. But why disturb it? just sit in the garden and enjoy the noises and the sounds around you and what you're looking at. And obviously, as I said, lots and lots of patience. I also take out a bottle of water and a snack sometimes. As I said, you never know how long you're going to be. But all the insects are out there. All you have to do is encourage them to come and visit your patch. So what I'd like to do is leave you with this final image of the UK's smallest bird. It's a goldcrest. It is slightly smaller than the wren, only winning on weight comparison. I think the size is very, very similar, but the goldcrest is smaller. As you can see, it's got a nice little thin beak, just right for picking out insects. It loves conifers, and this is one of the main reasons why I've never ever contemplated removing my lilandi at the bottom of the garden, because that's where they live. They've been nesting in our garden now successfully for the last 4 or 5 years. They are wonderful little creatures, and without the bugs and the trees, I wouldn't have the pleasure of this little fella and his family in the garden. And as David Attenborough says there, if the invertebrates were to disappear, the world's ecosystem would collapse. And that's why I love my garden. What more can I say?
Oh, Michelle, that was absolutely brilliant, love, and thank you very much. I'm just going to steal the screen back, but I do have a load of questions, so I hope you're ready for them.
Okay.
Yeah, but
yeah. Just have a drink of water. Go on.
I've answered what I can, but most of them I think are going to have to hand back over to you. So,
okay.
Just for a few of the late joiners, can you just quickly run over your equipment again? And they've asked a few about your lenses. If you could just recap what you use.
Yep, sure. I have a Canon 100 f2.8 macro lens. It's an EF lens. It's not image stabilized, probably, which is why I use the tripod. As you get older, you get shakier, and that's what I mainly use out in the garden. I do also have a Sigma lens, which I tend to use for the bigger, wider angle shots and things, but generally in the garden it is the 100 f2.8 Canon macro lens.
Brilliant. And is that just a personal choice? Because a few people have asked, could I just use this as an equivalent, or would you recommend that they get a macro lens for the job?
That's just my preference. As I said, I do have the Sigma 18-250, which I use for weddings. As I said earlier, I'm not a technical person. I get frustrated if I see something and I want to photograph it and I have to mess about changing lenses. So I have got one lens that generally covers all things, if that makes sense. So because I love my wildlife and I love my bugs particularly, the 100 just suits me.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you. Early in the presentation, you referred to using clamps. Are they actually camera clamps? Can you buy them in camera shops, or are they just something you picked up?
Yeah, they're actually called plamps, and it's spelled P for Peter,
yeah.
L-A-M-P-S.
Okay.
Clamps.
And where do people find those?
They're available from a company called Bob Rigby. They're the guys that import them, but they also sell them through Wex.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so you did give us some sort of your shooting apertures and your speeds and stuff as you're going through. Is there a standard settings for your camera at all?
No. Generally, no. Generally, I shoot the ISO. I tend to try and keep on either 100 or 200. And with regards to shutter speed, that generally is between 125 and 250, and the f-stops tend to be between 2.8 and 5.
Brilliant. Okay.
Mainly because I want to, blur the backgrounds and I want to get really close up in. Obviously, there was the one of the comma, which was slightly different because I wanted to keep the flowers in the background as well. So that one went out to 6.3. But generally, I like to keep it tight. I kind of look at my photography as it's like a scientific recording style. So I try to blur everything out in the back that I can and just keep in in the picture, you know, what I'm actually photographing.
Brilliant.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. You also, you did touch on you know, what to put in your garden. It was a lovely question that came quite early, so you probably have answered it. But I'm just about to get a garden, and I'm a complete beginner. Is there, you know, like what would you say is your must-have in the garden to attract, you know, insects?
The must-haves, I personally think, are things like the lavenders. They have quite a long flowering period, and they also smell nice as well. So you get the benefit as well as the insects. And as I said earlier, from a photography point of view, you can also then cut the stems quite long and dry them, and then you've also got you know, macro photographic material for wet, rainy days during the autumn and the winter, as well as the lavenders. All the plants I went through earlier are actually things that are in my garden, so I'd recommend all of those, obviously. Buddleias are very good. We've had an increase in butterflies over the last couple of years. They have been drifting off lately. Ivy is brilliant. I do a lot of macro photography, as I said, still life and plant stuff. So ivy I also use a lot during the winter for, you know, for the still life. A lot of what I've got has got is for a double-edged purpose. So as I said, there is the insect and the animal side of it, but I also like to photograph them personally as subjects in their own right. So go for whatever, you know. There's lots of things out there that are pretty. There's lots of things out there that are, you know, but go for something that, and also space. Consider what space you've got. There's no point getting a tree if you haven't got the space for it.
Oh, that's brilliant. Just probably going to be a bit difficult maybe to get across on a webinar, but a few people have asked, even though you're using the macro lens, how close would you say you are to your subject?
That depends how close you are. Firstly, that depends on how quietly you're sitting and how close you are to the subject, because sometimes they will actually come really, really close. And I have actually had bees on the end of the lens before because they've landed on it, not because it's in the middle of the flowers, but because they are comfortable with me being there and they're comfortable with the camera there. But generally, I'm about, I don't know, 20, 30 centimetres away. I'm not that far.
Excellent, brilliant. Well, staying on that note, how much of it? Yeah, of course.
Before you carry on, though, can I quickly go back to the plants? And somebody sort of said about a new garden. One thing you can buy in the garden centres these days are packets of seeds that are aimed specifically at encouraging birds. Not necessarily birds, but encouraging the butterflies and the bees. And obviously, that if you plant them sort of this time, then come the summer, they'll be coming through, and you will start getting things in the garden. And then obviously, you can then shake them off, and they'll reseed for next year. And a lot of them also have the seed heads on, so the birds will then get the advantage of that in the autumn. So that is a really good one to start with if you haven't got much space and you want to get something going quite quickly-ish. Sorry.
That's fine. No, you better when you like. This is your time. You know I don't know any of this stuff, so I'm learning. But I'm not going to start gardening or photographing insects. No, as much as I love your work. But I've actually had several comments saying I am going to become a nature photographer just from your talk. So that's fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we've talked about how close you are roughly. How much of it? How much post processing do you do, Michelle? Is it most of it out of camera?
Yes. Yes, I try not to process at all. I might give the colours a very slight tweak, as in, you know, take the black and the white in very slightly on the curves, but no, I try not to do anything to them at all. As far as I'm concerned, nature is nature. It should be seen as nature. I don't like to put textures or anything over the top of them. If they've got, like for example, it didn't have, but say for example one of the shield bug had a great big piece of dirt on the top of its head, then I might have cloned that out using some of the rest of the body, but generally no, I don't touch them if I can help it. It's the same with the bees and things, you know, they fly around covered in pollen and dust. You can't take it away, leave them as they are, that's how they look. It wouldn't be a proper scientific-y stroke, you know, educational recording of those species if you were to go cleaning them up and add in things. And oh no, sorry, I don't tend to do that if I can help it.
Brilliant.
Get it right in the camera.
Excellent. We have run time, but as long as Michelle's happy, I've got a million more questions. So you're happy to stay with us, and we'll crack on through these questions?
Yeah, sure.
And also, you do want to stay with us because I'm going to give you details on how you can actually win a place on one of Michelle's workshops soon. So we'll just get the questions finished off, and then we'll move on to that. Do you use any speed lighting at all? I'm not sure if you mentioned that earlier at all.
I do have a ring flash that I occasionally use, but I do try to avoid it where possible. There's a great big softbox in the sky. I use that where possible. Occasionally, some of the insects are obviously hidden under the leaves, like the shield bug in the Cotoneaster. That one had a reflector, and I don't think I used the flash on that one. In fact, I think all the images that I've shown tonight, none of them have had the flash on. So Brilliant. I tend to try and bounce the light with the reflector where I can.
Fantastic. Are you shooting completely in manual?
Yes.
That answered that one to the point. Excellent.
Sorry.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
I love it. It's brilliant. Actually, this is going back to my mistake earlier when I called it a clamp. Can you just briefly explain again what a clamp is?
It's a it's got bendy joints, and it's got two clamps, one at either end. There's a big one at one end, which I usually attach to the neck of the tripod or the leg of the tripod, or it could be attached to a largish branch. The smaller end is more like a pincer type clamp than a big clamp type, and I use it for holding twigs out of the way, or I can use it to hold a reflector with, or what else have I used it for? If, for example, the background is quite messy, or I've got something distracting in the background, I might use a piece of green card, for example, and I'll use the clamp to hold the card in position behind what I'm photographing.
Fabulous, thank you very much. You talked briefly earlier about some of your settings, and somebody just mentioned that they felt that like a 250th is fairly slow for moving insects. Do you use a faster shutter speed when they're for flights or so on?
I've never actually managed to catch anything in flight. So I've never actually, no.
Fair enough. That's well. I love the honesty, because obviously that's, you know, some of the people.
Most of what, as I said, I tend to just sit and wait for it to come to me. I admire these ones with the you know, the hoverflies just in front of you, and they're just hovering away. I've never been able to take one like that, and I'd love to be able to.
Ah, well, we'll have
so
that.
That's obviously on my list of things to do.
And for the next webinar, isn't it? Brilliant. I love it. Set your challenges already.
Thanks.
And I want that insect emerging from its pod as well. I remember.
Yes,
so,
yes,
yeah,
me too.
Excellent. How many shots does it take to get a good one? That's a good question, isn't it?
How long's a piece of string?
I thought you were going to say that, and rightly so.
Yeah, you knew I was going to say that.
Yeah.
It's like everything else, isn't it? It's exactly the same as portrait photography or something. It depends on your subject. If your subject is willing to work, then you can get it pretty straight off. The only thing with macro photography is sometimes you can't necessarily see what you've got, if that makes sense. You know, you look on the back of the screen and you think, yeah, that looks really, really great. But it's not until you get it on the computer that you think, oh no, that's slightly fuzzy, or, oh yeah, that's brilliant, that spider's eating an ant. Do you know what I mean? I didn't see that until I got it onto the screen.
Brilliant. So actually somebody's just posted straight away then. So are you taking, is there a big element of discovery, like you've just mentioned, afterwards? Are you taking the shots and then it's more so found in afterwards, or obviously you've been doing it?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it is, yes. As I said, I knew that spider was concentrating on something, but I couldn't see what, because it was so small. I couldn't see what, and it wasn't until I put it on the computer and I thought, oh, I see. Wow, we've got an ant for dinner. No wonder you were so, you know. And that's obviously why it sat so still for me, because it was busy eating.
Brilliant. I get you. Absolutely love it. some advice then maybe that you can help people doing similar photography. Is there any advice on how to market the work, how to sell the work at all?
No.
No.
It's not, believe it or not, it's limited, I found. It's not like, you know, your portrait clients come to you and they know what they want. While insects particularly, I found is quite difficult. I've had some stock images, but generally they're not the sort of things that people have been buying and want as canvases on their wall.
And I don't know why, because I have a lovely canvas of yours right behind my desk.
I know, I know.
We'll talk about that in a moment.
Can I just get you to hold on a minute? Hold on. It's right, my audience has just left. I've had my grandchildren in here all night and they've been ever so quiet, and they're now going home as one of the unexpected visits of today. Sorry about that.
Oh,
right.
That's fine. You're absolutely fine. Brilliant. Okay, so we've talked that most of it's out of camera, but what processing software do you use? Are you a Lightroom user or Photoshop or Bridge?
Yes.
Lightroom.
Yes, it's into Lightroom. Yeah, and then a very slight sharpen as it comes out.
That was my next question. Do you sharpen at all? So you do slightly sharpen the images?
Yes, a very light one. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I think most people will find, you know, that RAW is not quite as sharp as it could be. So yes, I do give it a little 100% on it.
And that leads to my next question. Are you shooting in RAW? And obviously I knew the answer, but the answer is yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Brilliant. Loads and loads of praise for tonight, so thank you again very much. Just a few more questions and then we'll just got a few things to tell people about. Autofocus or manual focus?
Auto. My as you know, one or two of the listeners probably know that as you get that little bit older, the eyesight starts failing, and mine has started deteriorating over the last 2 to 3 years, and I've had to start wearing glasses. So that obviously has caused extra problems as such for me doing macro work, because you need good eyesight to see what you're looking at. So we've actually adjusted the eyepiece on the camera to suit my eyes. So yes, everything is in autofocus, because I probably couldn't see it properly in manual.
Brilliant. Are you cropping much after the shot is taken?
No.
No.
I try not to. Some of the images are. The two caterpillars, you know, the head-to-head one, that was a cropped shot, but generally no.
Excellent. Do you use live view at all on your camera?
No.
Nope. Brilliant.
I do know how to use it, but I've never used it.
Excellent. Do you have your kit set up all of the time?
I'm just looking at my camera now. Yes, it's got a macro lens on it, so yes, most of the time. Yes, and my tripod is always out and ready in the conservatory, so yes. And I've also got the little mount piece for the tripod on the bottom of the camera, so yes, it is a case of just pick it up and go. So
I've already have a request. Can we have a webinar from Michelle on her extreme macro, please? So I'm asking you live. It might be. Yeah, sure. Brilliant. Okay, so we were going to get onto that. So that's brilliant. Well, that's all the questions. So thank you for that. There's a few things also that we want to share with our audience. Now, you do run your own macro workshops. That's correct, isn't it? That's correct. Yep. And they can get in touch with you via your website, which is mymacroworld.co.uk. Yep. And they can find the workshops. Can you just want to quickly explain the difference between your macro workshop and your extreme macro workshop, just for our audience? Yep, sure. With the macro workshop, we cover a multitude of sins. It's not just the insects. On the last one we did some flowers. We did some seed heads. It was back in the autumn. So I tend to try and use whatever's available at the time. So as I said, we use seed heads, flowers, leaves. Depending on the weather and the time of year, we could use soap bubbles,
textiles, things like zips, kitchen utensils, anything and anything. A lot of it tends to be abstract type stuff as well as, physical stuff you can see what it is. And the extreme macro workshops, they are centered around the Canon 65mm MPE macro lens, and which is a lens that's got a very, very fixed focal point, and it's based, or it's the camera and the lens are positioned on a sliding rail, and you move the rail forward in very, very slow increments and take pictures at each stage. And then what you do is you have some software that you stack the images on, so these get really, really close up, and you get the real close-up of the, the wasp's eyes and the fly's eyes and things like that. So the detail on that is absolutely amazing. So that's the two different types that I do. I try and keep them separate because you couldn't do both lots in one day, really.
Oh, that's brilliant. And again, that's mymacroworld.co.uk if you want to go and check out Michelle's workshops. But we're actually going to be telling you how you can win a place on one of her workshops in a moment. But before we get on to that, tell us about the book that you've just written, Michelle, with your grandchildren.
It is. It's the first in a series of books. I've got two grandchildren, one's 5 and one's 7. The 7-year-old Josh is a very, very keen photographer. He knows how to work a Canon Mark II, a 5D Mark II. He can set backing lights up, studio lights. He's a bit of a whiz. But what they actually use is a little Fuji bridge camera, and the idea behind it is to get the kids taking pictures and having fun. It's not about well, it is a little bit about composition, but it's not about, confusing things with f-stops and ISOs. It's all about, taking pictures, enjoying it.
Well, that's absolutely brilliant. And I don't, even though you said you've written it for children, I think we could all learn from that. And it's all, photography is about.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Playing and having some fun.
It's about imagination, creativity, and I think sometimes as adults we tend to lose a little bit of our imagination. And the book, although it's aimed at 7 to 11-year-olds, we've done things in there like taking photographs with smoke. Food colouring, it's getting back to basics and getting back to enjoying taking pictures.
Oh, that's
and actually, we've actually done a few images on canvases for a kitchen. So the kids are really, really getting into it. And we're in the middle of the second book. As I said, the first one's about creating patterns, and the second one that we're in the middle of doing is food and drink.
Fabulous. And that we can get, anybody can buy that from purplechameleonbooks.co.uk. Is that right?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes, so that's
I have posted out all the links to the attendees that are with us tonight, but they also can be found on our Facebook page. So it just leaves me to thank you very, very much, Michelle. And you've already agreed to do another webinar for us on extreme macro photography.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And thank you all for joining us this evening. We've enjoyed it.
We've had fantastic feedback. We've loved having you. The images are fantastic. I do like them apart from the spiders.
I just hoped it wasn't too much of a gardening type theme and it was a little bit of anything and everything. But
no, the feedback.
The work you put into it, you'll get the reward, and you'll get these little species into your garden. They're just phenomenal, and they're so small that I think we all take for granted what's under our noses. We don't appreciate what's there.
Absolutely, and I've learned. I'm learning. I'm around these photographers all day, but I've learned something new tonight. It's been fantastic, and the feedback already has been fantastic, and a great presentation. So we are going to call it a day. So Michelle can go and have a glass of wine and relax.
Excellent.
So thank you again. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Jay for the Photography Academy. Thanks a lot. See you next time. Cheers, everybody. Bye now.